We've been continuing on this series, looking at some of these radical characters throughout the Bible. We've been jumping all over the place. Today, we're looking at Moses. So if you want to head to Exodus chapter 3 from verse 7, so Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to have a little bit about Moses. I hope you've carved out 3 or 4 hours this morning as we explore the different pieces of Moses. Let me give you a short summary of the life of Moses. So Moses, some of you may know a little bit about him, some of them not much at all. But Moses is one of those characters in the Bible we actually get to know a fair bit about. There's some really important characters that are really pivotal in the life of the biblical narrative and the salvation of the world, but we know hardly anything about them. Moses is on the other end of the spectrum. We actually get to know a lot about Moses. And one of the reasons is that he's written the first 5 books of the Bible. He actually writes a fair bit. Now, we have Genesis, which covers a span of a time frame of about 2,500 years. So the first book covers 2,500 years. The next 4 books in the Bible cover the lifetime of Moses. And so it's kind of like we fast forward, here's a whole bunch of key events, and then it sort of stops and sort of slows down and digs into a lot more detail. And so we get to know Moses in those books, now particularly in the book of Exodus. Now Moses was born in Egypt, in an era where the nation of Israel, where God's people weren't in anywhere near Israel. They were in Egypt. He was born into a space where they were in slavery. So most of the Israelite people were in slavery and they were oppressed by the nation of Egypt. He was born in an era as a baby where the Pharaoh had decided to kill every single newborn baby. So Moses should have been killed. Every male newborn child was to be killed. And so this is the moment in which Moses was born. As we read earlier in the first couple of chapters of Exodus, we get a snapshot of these early eras. We see that he was hidden for 3 months. He was placed on the Nile River in this sort of papyrus sort of basket coated with tar and pitch when he was 3 months old. Pushed out on the Nile River and watched by his sister. We also read that in the midst of that, the Nile has a lot of crocodiles, similar to our river. It's not the most safest river to kind of get pushed out on. But we see in the midst of that is that he was saved from this river by none other than the daughter of Pharaoh. He was saved and redeemed. And this daughter of Pharaoh said, he knew that this was a Hebrew boy. She would have known that he should be put to death. It was in this period. But instead, she decides to take him in, and decides to, in fact, pay his own mother to look after him for the first years of his life. Any mums get paid to look after their kids? No, this is a really interesting sort of story, So that's what happened. So we kind of have this interesting. As he grew older, he heads into the Pharaoh's palace. He actually grows up with some of the key people in the nation of Israel, in the nation of Egypt. And so it's incredible that he grew up in that space. Fast forward a number of years, and we see that he visits his people, his own nation, his own people, and he sees the oppression that the Hebrew people are under. And in an act of, we're not sure, maybe it was frustration, maybe an act of, he was tired, it was the end of the year, and maybe he was just frustrated. Teachers out there are probably frustrated with their kids and don't go to these lengths, but it was a moment where he killed an Egyptian for what they were doing to the Hebrew people, to his own people, his own family. And he killed it, hid it up, hid this person, buried it, thinking nobody would know. But people knew, word was spreading. And so in fear of his life, he fled to the region of Midian. Now Midian's about 500 kilometres, that's a long way to flee. And so he gets on foot and he just flees and just heads as far as he can. One of the interesting things, as he heads to this era of Midian, he finds people who are followers of God. He finds people who love God. In fact, he finds a priest of God in this land of Midian, and he's welcomed into their family and settles in to this place, marries a lovely woman and finds this space and becomes a shepherd. So, snapshot of the early years of Moses' life. And so this is where we pick up this section in Exodus chapter 3. Moses is tending his flock and he finds and discovers and stumbles across this bush that was on fire, but it was not burning up. And so from verse 7, the Lord starts to speak to him and he says this. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you. That is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask, what is his name? Then what shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. So go, assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you, and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of the misery in Egypt, into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And the elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and to say to him, the Lord, the God of Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and I will strike the Egyptians and all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards his people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in a house for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. It's quite a cool sort of interaction. Sort of one day you're sort of just tending the sheep, and then God, through a audible and physical sort of space, speaks to you directly. Something pretty cool. And so the question as we get to these sort of characters, the question as we go, what actually makes Moses a radical character? You know, we've kind of labeled him a radical character of God. What makes him so radical? Is it his story of birth? The fact that he should have died. He should have died in multiple spaces. He should have died the moment he was born. The Pharaoh's guard should have come and killed him. He probably should have died being put on the Nile River, either sort of just left there and just to sort of die, or crocodile eating him, or whatever it is. He almost should have died when Pharaoh's daughter found him and said, "Oh, this is one of the Hebrew babies. They're meant to be dead." But he didn't. Is that what makes him radical? What makes him radical is the position of power that he was elevated to. The role that he had in Egypt to actually be welcomed in to the family of Pharaoh, that Egyptian family. Does that make him a radical follower? What about the fact that when he fled, when he killed this Egyptian and he decided, I need to flee, I need to get out? What makes him radical is the fact that he found followers of God. He actually found his community and family amongst that space. They're pretty cool, miraculous stories. They're pretty cool, miraculous things of how God worked amongst Moses. Maybe if we look beyond this space, it was what made Moses radical, the fact that he delivered the nation of Israel. Through the Red Sea, he delivered them out of the hands. The plagues came amongst Egypt. Is that what makes Moses a radical leader? He met with God and received the commandments. Is that what makes him radical? I think those things are pretty cool, but I don't think that's what makes him a radical character of God. They're incredible miracles. And you and me have experienced incredible miracles that God has worked amongst us. But that's not what makes us radical. Verse 12 is a key verse to what makes God radical. What makes Moses radical. Verse 12, it starts with, "And God said, I will be with you." I will be with you. I will be with you. This will be a sign. I'll show you that I will be with you. See, the radical nature of God is that Moses even fesses up later on. He goes, "I'm actually not a worthy leader. Hey, do you know what I did? I actually killed somebody. Yeah. Do you know what I did? I fled my people. Do you know, in fact, I'm actually really not a good speaker. Why would I be the leader? I've got to actually declare in front of Pharaoh." Why? Even in this interaction with this amazing burning bush, if God speaks to you through a burning bush, you just say yes to whatever God says. And he questions. He goes, "Oh, no, like, how do I really know? What am I going to call you?" That doesn't seem like a radical leader. He actually questions God himself when God miraculously shows up. He didn't have the best upbringing. He disobeyed God. When we start to think about those elements of Moses, we can start to relate to him. You start to go, yeah, there's moments in my life where I've disobeyed God. There's moments in my life where I go, I'm actually really not a good speaker. There's moments in my life where I've missed what God was doing, and I've just wanted to flee. Sometimes at the end of the year now, you can get to this point where I'm so tired. I just need to go and have a holiday. I just need to go away. This place of Midian sounds really lovely. Can we just go away for a little bit and just have a bit of a holiday, and then I'll come back later? We can relate to Moses in this way. But what makes Moses radical is that God was with him. Not the miracles that he performed, not the ways in which he experiences God's mighty hand, but God was with him. It's incredible. In every single big moment of my life, every big decision that I've had to make, we've gone to God and we've kind of gone, God, what are you doing in this space? Give us direction. We haven't had a burning bush experience or moment, where God is verbally and audibly say, this is what you're to do. And you're like, yes, sweet, I got that. I can move on. But in those moments, we've really experienced the peace of God in that area, a sense of really clear direction in the big moments. That God has said, yeah, I'm with you in this. This is a good plan. This is a good direction of God. And I've known that God is with me. How do you experience God with you? How do you move to a space where you're like, yeah, I know that God's in this place. I know that God is with me. You see, these radical characters and these radical biblical characters, some of us, when we grew up in church, we looked at Moses and Noah and all these, and we're like, these are really cool characters. Who looked at those as in kids ministry and go, these are really cool characters? Anybody with me? Yeah, there's a few there. And you go, these are really cool, but you often can't relate to them. I'm not freeing the nation of Israel out of Egypt. Anybody experience that? No, there's a few of us here that have been to Midian and sort of know that. Oh, Elizabeth is freeing the nation of Israel out of Egypt. We can't relate to that. But what can we relate to? You see, this promise that God is with Moses is actually carried on to us as his church. This promise that God is with us is found time and time again. We head to Matthew 1, verse 23. The actual birth of Jesus is a promise that God is with us. See, it says, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. The very promise. Matthew 28, verse 20, as God is commanding his people, he says that I will be with you, I'm teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the very end of the age. God is with you. Excuse me. John 14, verse 16 to 7 repeats the same promise. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be with you. You see, the promise of God's being with us was not just with Moses. It was not just with Joseph last week. It wasn't just with Peter the week before. It's not, the promise of God being with us is not just for radical characters that we see in the Bible. But that same promise is for you. The same promise that God is with you. That God is with you through the Holy Spirit. That God is with you in the truth of Jesus. The same promise that sits with Moses to do these incredible, radical things is with you as well. So what do you do with that? What are you doing with that very promise? You see, Moses, God really spoke to him mightily. But Moses could have, in that moment, said, nah, God, I'm out. That's too much. I'm loving this Midian place. I'm not going back to Egypt. He could have. But Moses made a choice in that time. He said, even though I don't feel like I'm worthy, even though I don't feel like I can do that, your promise that you're going to be with me, that you're going to journey alongside me, that you're going to support me in this entire journey is a promise I'm going to hold on to, and I'm going to be obedient to your call. I'm going to be obedient to what you have for me. There was a moment that Moses had to make a decision that made him a radical character. There's a moment where he, in fact, moved from being a shepherd, looking after his lovely sheep. Nice, soft, comfortable life in Midian. There was a moment when he moved from being a shepherd, where he actually said, "No, I'm going to make that decision, and I'm going to become a full-blown warrior for you." This is a moment where he said, "Yeah, I'm going to be obedient to your call. I'm going to take a step and I'm going to listen." Now, Moses tackled pretty amazing sort of things, but he takes a moment and he goes, "No, I'm going to be a warrior for you. I'm going to accept your call and I'm going to take upon this call." He moves from the shepherd to a warrior pose. He takes on the greatest nation. Oh, that's a bit messy. Ooh. He decides to take on one of the most powerful nations ever. He becomes a warrior. He moves from that moment. Not because he had like an amazing sort of movie transition moment where he got superhero powers or whatever it is. Not much changed. Apart from the moment where he made a choice and says, "I'm going to be obedient to what you're going to call me into. I'm going to make a decision today to move from being a shepherd to a warrior for you. And I'm going to declare the incredible words that you have for me over this world." He moved from a shepherd to being a warrior from God. This didn't mean that he became perfect all of a sudden. This doesn't mean that he all of a sudden had it all together. Far from that. He was radical because he was obedient to the call that God was with him and that God is going to call him into something greater. That's what made him a radical character. The radical nature of Moses was that God was with him and that Moses was obedient to the call. These two things went together and created him and made him into a radical follower and a radical character that we can speak about him thousands of years later and be inspired. And the thing is, you too can be a radical character of God. This doesn't stop with Moses. His example of following God is not unachievable. Our call is different. I was praying today for a burning bush so that God would really just speak through it and I didn't have to speak. But God said, "No. These people, our church, we don't need a burning bush. You're listening already." See, you can be a radical follower by simply knowing that God is with you and being obedient to God's call in your life. I've been so encouraged as I've been meeting with our life group leaders and how our church and how different people in our church are being obedient to God's call in their life. I'm not expecting that everybody will go to the most powerful nation in the world and say, "Let my people go." That's probably not your call. That's not what God is doing. But I'm encouraged. Our people over the last few months, some new followers of Jesus, some who have been followers of Jesus for many years, and they're moved to a point where they're like, I want to share the gospel. Yeah, how do I actually share about Jesus to those around me? I actually have a desire now to share about Jesus, and they're doing it. These are radical people of God. If you're doing that, you're a radical character of God. You know, there are people that are serving in ministry areas, even right now in our church, that have said, oh, I'll never do kids ministry, or I'll never do youth ministry, or I don't think I'm capable to do that. But when somebody's asked them, when they've heard the call, they've said, why not? I'll give it a go. And these people are radical characters of God, because they're doing incredible and amazing things in that area, calling people to follow Jesus. This is the radical nature of serving God. You know, there are people in our church over the last few months that are experiencing new spiritual disciplines like they never have before. A radical character of God looks at God and go, I've worshipped God in this way for all my life. It's comfortable. But a radical a follower of God, moves out into things that aren't super comfortable, but expand their horizons and actually see there's many ways in which you can worship God. And so we've seen people that are moving into that space, moving into new spiritual disciplines, different ways that they are connecting with God on another level. So you can be a radical character of God. There's many stories I could tell of our church of people who are radical characters of God. And so my call today is, would you be willing to take that step? God is with you. We've already got that bit. That's easy. Sometimes we need to be reminded of that bit. Just like Moses, God is with you. But now's the time to take a step to be obedient to what God has for you. It doesn't have to be big, but just small. Start with sharing what Jesus means to you to a work colleague. Start with sharing what you've done this weekend and what God has spoken to you. Start with something small. Invite someone to have coffee with you. Ask them how they live without Jesus. That's a pretty big step. Talk to those around you. There are people here today in this very room that are on a journey discovering who Jesus is. We love that. But it's time. There are some of you here today that need this message. There's some of you here today that are sitting there and you're comfortable living your life in Midian. It's enjoyable. It's nice. We all like to be there. That's a very nice space. But God has something greater for you. God has something greater. He's calling you, from being a shepherd, looking after the lovely sheep, to take the call and be obedient as a warrior for God, to see amazing things. God has an incredible purpose for each and every one of us. We simply have to be obedient to that call. So I want to invite the worship team up here. If God is leading you in that space, maybe you're not sure what the steps is to be obedient. We would love to help you and journey alongside you in that. We'd love you to help discover what God has for you. We invite some of the elders and some of the prayer team down the front here, and we want to pray with you. And maybe God's leading you into something, and we want to journey alongside you in that space. So I invite you to come forward. Take that first step in obedience by stepping out in your faith.